So they were able to steal any musician they wanted
And
to
music
form
orchestra.
this wonderful orchestra. And they wanted to present him with a group that was not a disparate 100 or 110 people who had never played together but were simply very talented, but they wanted to present him with an ensemble. And that meant that somebody had to come and train them before Toscanini got there for the first rehearsal. And they asked Rodzinski to do that. And he spent 6 or 7 weeks in early 1937 training arranging this orchestra to become a team instead of a bunch of individuals. And of course, I mean, as I've heard from any number of people who were there, when the old man came in and started the rehearsal at the end of this, they waited to see if he would explode, and instead he said, "Bene, bene, bene, good, good, good." So they succeeded.
Was Rodzinski then head of the New York Philharmonic, or was this? Yeah, he was. Okay.
That's a funny story too, because he took over the Philharmonic from an Englishman with an Italian name named John Barbaroli, who in turn had taken it over after Toscanini left, retired officially forever, except that he was lured back, as I said, by the NBC. So here's Barbaroli, comes in after this monster of a musician, this dynamo, and he's a very good but very young, relatively inexperienced conductor, and it's sort of as if you were saying, I'm trying to think now, well, as if Churchill has just left office and you appoint Mike Bloomberg or somebody like that to take over
George Allen.
the English government, you know, or something like that. It's talented, but not in the same league. Anyway, so poor Barbaroli had a very rough 4 years. And finally, they thought, we've got to do something better, and they were going to upgrade, and they upgraded by engaging Rodzinski. And they engaged him, of course, for some 5 guest performances before the season that was to come, where he would take over as musical director. And Rodzinski came in, and he had some rehearsals, and then was interviewed by the New York Times. Now he's still a guest conductor. And the next day was front page headlines, because it says, Rodzinski to fire inadequate personnel of the New York Philharmonic.
Ooh.
Well, you can imagine how well that's said. The Philharmonic at that time had an Italian mafia running the orchestra, led by a concertmaster named Michel Piastro, and especially a first oboe player who was about 4'9", and everybody in the orchestra was terrified of him. He had this kind of, I don't know, Mussolini-type personality. He was afraid of nobody. And these two guys ran this Italian mafia, and they ran who was in it, who was hired, who was fired, and so on. And now all of a sudden they see in the New York Times this new guy, before he's even taken over the position. He's now just a guest conductor. And he announces, when I come in, boy, I'm going to fire DiMaggio and Mantle and Barris and Henry Aaron and so forth. They're not good enough for me. So they waited for him. For the next rehearsal, he shows up, and I never forgot this, because the first thing that he was going to conduct was the First Symphony of Beethoven. And the last movement of that is a famous, difficult passage to conduct, because it is a recitative for orchestra. So there's no tempo involved. And it's a build-up by Beethoven, and it goes, dee, ta, pa, pi, stops. Pa, pi, and so forth. It just keeps building one note at the end of the phrase, going up like this, and the last one goes, ba-da-dee-da-bee-ba-bee, ba-da-da-da-ba-bee-da-ba-ba-ba, like this. All of a sudden this speedy tempo comes in. And it's been a problem for conductors since the beginning of time, how you break out of this not only slow passage, but a slow passage which has no rhythm. And so very often you hear these, and then gradually they come together, but the first part's a mishmash. And Rodzinski, of course, this great technician, is showing them that he is the man who has conquered the problem, and he knows the orchestra has never experienced anything quite like this before, but he's going to show them how to do it. This is the New York Philharmonic, right? So they don't say anything, and they go along, the rehearsals are finished, and now comes the concert, and I was at this concert, by 1940, I'll never forget it. They came to this spot, and he's like this, and the orchestra goes, leaves him right, he hasn't moved his hands or anything to show, we need you like a hole in the wall, pal. It's a great difficult problem, we can do, the whole orchestra can do it without you, and perfectly. And all that happened was that this concertmaster, who was one of the two leading members of the Mafia who was going to be fired, he simply went like that. The orchestra just took off. And Rodzinski was so unsettled that the orchestra went on by itself, but it took him, I don't know, 10 bars before he could refocus and sort of join them. And anybody who was at all knowledgeable, it was so obvious that it was embarrassing. And they said, okay, you can fire us, but we're going to show you what a schmuck you are. I've rarely seen that. I mean, conductors and orchestras are natural enemies anyway. Very hard to win over the love of an orchestra.